opening bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers joining you guys on a Thursday edition in the summer, which means it's time to get back to summer scouting. This episode is all about the interior defensive line. And if you missed the edge rushing episode where we got first into the defensive line, pop back. You can listen to that. That was last Thursday's episode. But now around and out, we're getting to the rest of the big boys, the guys up front. We're getting to some interior defensive linemen as we keep our eyes on the 2023 NFL draft and the 2022 college football season. Connor, how are we feeling going into week 2 of D-line scouting here for this little exercise that we have? How you doing, my friend?
Feeling good, man. This is obviously going to be a fun group today. All of them have been. Obviously, I think everybody's excited to hear about a certain player in this group. But getting away from that, I have to say and I know you feel the same way, blown away by the response of the part 1 of the expansion episode.
Oh,
I mean,
dude.
Unbelievable response, the interaction, people making their teams. Even if I didn't write back to you or Trevor didn't write back to you, we're reading all of them. We love that you guys are engaged with the fact that there could be cap compliant, the different rules, the things that you wanted to see that we didn't follow, in case we ever do this again to maybe tweak some of the format. But man, it was my favorite show of the summer, and I'm so glad that everyone felt the same way.
So this is, I thought that this idea was going to be cool, right? I wouldn't have been doing an idea with you if we didn't think that it was going to be cool. But you guys have already taken this thing to another level with creating your own teams before we get to next Monday's episode and finalize our own draft. If you guys are listening, you didn't listen to this past Monday's episode, go back and listen to it. It was genuinely one of the most fun podcast episodes I've literally ever done. Not just for this podcast, not just during the summer. It was a lot of fun getting to set the stage for the expansion draft. If you guys missed it, if you aren't following the NFL Stock Exchange Twitter account, you need to do that, because if you didn't, then you missed it. If you want to kind of do your own expansion draft before Connor and I do ours, the stipulations that we landed on, since we were kind of all over the place during the episode, like, oh, maybe we'll do this, oh, maybe we'll do this.
It's hard.
Confusing the shit out of them the whole time. But
yeah, it's true.
The rules that we settled on are, we're going to draft one player from every team. So we're not going to fill out the full roster, because the more I thought about it, the more I was like researching like what the Houston Texans did. They only drafted 19 players. It's not like they drafted a full team from the NFL, because if they would have done that, it actually would have been really unfair. It would have been probably the deepest team in the NFL. So we're only going to have them pick one player from every team in this exercise. It could be offense or defense, but we've got to form a starting 22, and then we've got 10 reserve players, okay? And then the other stipulation that we have in there, because we wanted to make it a little bit more challenging, a little bit more of a strategy exercise, is we've got to stay under 60% of what the league cap is, which is, if you take $208.2 million, which is what the league salary cap is right now, 60% of that is 125.2. So if you guys are out there doing your own exercise, those 32 players that you draft have to be under 125.2 million cap. That's what it's got to be total. And that's a lot more than what the Houston Texans got, because the rule for them was they couldn't go over 38% of the salary cap. A lot of what the Houston Texans had to do came in the draft, obviously having the first pick in the draft, and then a lot of undrafted free agents. But we didn't want to do this exercise and fill most of the team with undrafted free agent guys that you guys don't even know, that you don't have an attachment to. So I get it. It's not as realistic as it would probably be in real life, but this is probably a more fun way for us to do it. So those are the official rules that we'll go into with Monday.
Yeah, I think the point is, would we love to have it down to an exact science? So from when this day comes, it's like, yeah, we did this already. Like, this is what it's going to look like. Like, I think, sure, in a sense, but also there is an entertainment aspect of this, that we want to show which players from a team could be expendable for certain reasons. Like, look, we went through it, like the Bills and the Chiefs are the two that come off the top of my head. They're just too talented. They're going to lose a good player.
Right.
That might not even be an expensive player. They're just going to lose a good player. But then you look at it from a perspective like, why wouldn't an expansion team claim J.J. Watt, who, or Kenny Galladay, right? Guys that are really expensive, that are hurt a lot at this point in their career, but could still be the face of a new franchise, or can be an impact player if everything went perfectly, because that risk of that money doesn't really matter to an expansion team. And the team that's losing them might be like, we didn't protect him because we want to lose that money. So it's just kind of showing, a little look behind the curtain of a lot of different scenarios rather than trying to perfect this is what the next NFL team would look like today.
Yeah, it was an exercise that was a lot of fun to do. You guys blew up the YouTube comments about it, and I read every single one of them.
It was awesome.
You guys are, you are taking this idea to the next level. I love you for it. That's what makes doing this podcast so much fun, is that you guys are sitting there basically involved in a podcast with us. Y'all are co-hosts just like we're co-hosts here in front of the microphone. And so we're going to try to take a lot of the screenshots that you guys have if you drafted your own team, and we're going to try to read them on the show next episode after we draft ours, so we can see like which ones we liked, what strategies you guys went with, who you picked up, who were some common players that everybody's picking up, all that kinds of stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun on next Monday's episode when we kind of finalize it. But we got a couple of days until then. But right now we got to talk about interior defensive linemen. But before we jump in, got a little question out there for all the gentlemen. You guys strive for gold in your life, right? Gold medals, gold watches, gold everything. However, I do have to say there is a certain type of man who goes the extra mile, walks in the confidence of an eagle, giggles in the face of danger. He is a big, hairless winning machine, and when he unzips his pants, he sees platinum. That is right. Manscaped would like to introduce to you their biggest, best ultimate hygiene package yet, the Platinum Package 4.0. Our friends over at Manscaped, they're the leader in below-the-waist grooming. Now you can trust them with the whole shebang. You can join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com, using the promo code PFF, and getting 20% off, plus free shipping. Manscaped's brand new Platinum Package 4.0 is the biggest, best bundle they have ever given you, now for a bulk discount on their top products. Get 20% off and free shipping using that promo code PFF over at manscaped.com. It's time that you enjoy the finer things in life and get yourself a Platinum Package for your Platinum Package. If you guys have been listening to the summer scouting, you know how it goes. Connor and I are going to give our top fives here, preseason top fives for the interior defensive linemen. We'll start at number 5. We'll go all the way down to number 1, and then we'll give some shout outs to some guys that just missed the list as well. So Connor, I'll let you start as always. Who you got at number 5 here for the interior D-line group?
Number 5 for me was a breakout player from last year, and that is Colby Wooden from Auburn.
Oh, nice.
That, is an interesting player when you just look at him right away, being 6'5", 280. That is not your prototypical interior D-line build all the time. But starting with Colby Wooden here, moved all over the place on the D-line. I think they actually like that hybrid body type with him because they feel like he has some of the quicks to kick out a little bit, and then some of the power that they could trust him as a shade nose when needed, or a 3-tech, obviously. But he quickly gets off the ball for his size. Plenty of pop in his always active hands. I think that's the main thing for me here with Wooden, is that I just thought he had very active hands where he was always trying to make something happen on the rush or working against the run. Motor is legit. He even worked through a few triple teams to land effort sacks that I saw that, especially at the college level, I think some people look at that and go, man, that's not really a skill. That's not really translatable. It's not draftable. At some point it is, when you're getting a triple team and the quarterback is taking a deep drop. Some guys just stand there and go, man, I'm taking on 3 guys. Somebody else has to win, which I get. For this guy, he kept working. He kept moving. He's a little bit dancing bear, kept moving inside, outside. The quarterback would scramble wide. He would have the vision to see that, and he'd go chase him down. So I really liked that aspect of his game. I wrote he could probably play at 300 pounds. There's room to put more mass on his frame. I understand why he's not doing that at Auburn right now. I think they like him where his weight is at. I think his body is fine. I think that they like him in that hybrid role. But if an NFL team looks at him and goes, man, we want you to, kick in a little bit more and play above 300, or we want you to be a 300-pound 3-tech, he has the body to do it. So he wears this giant arm brace. You can't miss him. He's got the bionic arm. It's like that J.J. Watt arm. But he was a player for me, Trev, that I liked his effort. I liked his versatility. And I thought he did some damage in the SEC last year. He was very active and very productive, both as a effort rusher, an active rusher, and as a somewhat responsible run defender. So he was someone to me that I thought was well worthy of this list. I haven't seen him getting a lot of hype, preseason hype, but he was a quiet breakout player for the Tigers last year.
Yeah, so I know Mike wrote him up. I didn't get a chance to get eyes on him for this exercise, so I definitely need to, especially after what you said there about him being a worker in the trenches. And I think that's, man, it is such a trait. It's a trait that is so important, is probably just the best way to say it, because playing in the trenches has got to suck, man. I mean, dude, I am 5'10", 170 pounds.
We're 6'5",
right now,
260.
Okay? Like, I've never in my life at any point been considered whether you're playing recess football or flag football or whatever. Nobody has ever looked at me and said, hey, you play like on the defensive line or offensive line or anything like that. So I've never personally experienced playing in the trenches, but it looks brutal. You're just getting beat up every single snap. And to take that kind of physical punishment, and yet for the motor to run hot at all times, I just think is a mental advantage for a lot of these guys that have that ability to just continue to work, continue to have the motor run really hot. So that's definitely something that I love watching guys like that. So he's definitely a player that I've got to watch. Number 5 on my list, I've got Gervin Dexter, the interior defensive lineman from Florida. Incredible frame, man. 6'5", 300. They've got him listed at 318 pounds. I think he probably played closer to 300 when he was at Florida.
I thought the same thing. I didn't think he had that kind of weight on film.
He's gained weight during the summer, and I think they updated his weight profile to that. I believe he was a lot closer to that round 300 number when he was playing, because you see that. I think you definitely see that on film, that you go, that's not a 320-pound guy. Now, he carries his weight really well anyways.
Yeah,
that's something that I have in the scouting report. Whether you want to say that he's 300, 305 pounds on the tape, or whether you want to say like he's 315, it doesn't matter. He's carrying it incredibly well. He looks like a true athlete playing nose tackle, and you just do not see that very often. He's got the length at 6'5". That's very unique for him there. 5-star defensive tackle. He was a unanimous 5-star, I believe, in recruiting, from Lake Wales, Florida. I read that in high school, he led the entire state in sacks when he got 15 sacks in just 10 games of the regular season, his senior season. Also qualified for the state track and field championships in the discus throw. So I had to make sure to give that little background shout out to him there as well. Strength and weaknesses with Gervin Dexter, outside of the obvious frame advantages that he has, and me saying that he's extremely well built as a player. The athletic build at a massive size. Arm length is a huge advantage when engaging at the snap, especially in run defense. He is able to get his hands up and into offensive linemen, hold them at that point from a distance, create that separation to where they really can't break that grip. They really can't get into his chest, while he is continuing to keep his eyes in the backfield, wondering whether I'm shedding to the right, I'm shedding to the left, whatever it is. He just has such an advantage because of that length, keeping offensive linemen at bay. And unless they're really churning those legs and really pushing him back, he often can stand strong in that area, and he makes the most out of his length, which I really like to see. He's got the pass rush ability. As I've said, you note the athleticism to him. It's just not very often you get a player with his length, with his build, that's playing as a zero tech, a one technique kind of a player that's shading off the center. And so the athletic ability, the ability to one gap right in between the center and the guard, that just doesn't come around very often. So all of that is strengths to his profile. Doesn't have a ton of experience, or I will say consistency with success right now. I think we kind of get into areas to improve. The biggest area, Connor, for me with Dexter, and I'm curious whether he's in your top 5 or whether you're going to talk about him.
I wrote him up.
He's got to disengage quicker, man. Yes. There's so many there's so many reps where I watched a handful of games of him, and it's like, okay, we hike the ball at the snap. Even if you're not pinning your ears back on a true pass rush rep, there are opportunities for you to throw the defender off, which I've seen him do many times. But it's just like the play is happening and it's moving, and it's just he is a second too late when disengaging from the offensive lineman. And you can see it in his head when it clicks. He will pull you. He will rip you to the side. He will swipe your hands away. He will do a club rip and get right by you. He knows how to get past these interior offensive linemen, but he doesn't do it quick enough. it's like he's a step late when you would want him to disengage and anticipate, shed the block, get into the backfield, go make the play. So, man, I just feel like that's the biggest area for him is he's got to disengage a lot quicker. I also have written has to be able to get the hands where they need to be, hit a move, get into the backfield, showing the athletic ability. He just does not do it quickly enough to be an impactful guy. I also said this, and it would make sense that he gained weight. I don't think he plays strong enough for a guy who plays nose tackle. If you want to teach him to be a true one gap penetrating 3 technique player, okay, move him there. If you are going to keep him at nose, which look, Florida can do whatever the hell they want. We know these schools aren't exactly in the business of making these guys as the best pros possible. They're trying to create the biggest mismatches they can. Certainly, Gervin Dexter playing in the middle as a nose tackle is a massive disadvantage for how unique he has a build. But he cannot play nose tackle at the weight that he was last year or the strength profile that he was last year. He'll get blown off the ball every time any kind of duo or double team comes his way. So I thought he was a little bit out of position last year. I thought he was a little too timid when it came to disengaging blocks. When I watched Dexter, it is in no way a lack of ability or gifts from him. It's simply, I think he's got to play a different position or he's got to be a little bit bigger, one of the two. Something I just has to change for him moving forward to get the most out of his potential.
Man, you nailed it. And I'm glad that he's your number 5 because I was between him and Wooden for my number 5. And
okay,
I went with the guy that has a higher floor. Dexter has a much higher ceiling. Mm-hmm. And when people say a ball of clay, this is kind of the guy they often are talking about, this type of player that you can write down things that he's not good at right now, and they are very true. And I agree with you. I wrote that he needs to play with a little more power and just better leverage.
Yeah.
The leverage, that's when he gets lost, Trev, that he's lost in the play, lack of leverage. But it's funny to me. Like, you turn on a game like the Missouri game, and there was one other game where that happens a lot. Then you watch him at Alabama, where they stick his butt right at zero tech. Zero against Alabama, the worst place on earth that anybody listening to this show can be. Right over the head of the center. And he does a really good job. He's moving people. He's disengaging. So, and he's a young guy. I think he was a true sophomore last year.
He was.
And when you factor that in, it's really impressive for me, a guy that was not, you're right, he was not playing at 318 last year. I would be surprised if he was over 300 pounds last year. And they put him at nose and shade nose, snap after snap after snap in the SEC. That is not easy for a 19-year-old at the time that is still gaining weight and getting stronger. When he sees red, when that light comes on, he makes some big-time plays. He can collapse the pocket with strength. I wrote down the last thing I wrote on him, which is probably the most important. I said if he refines his hand usage, he's going to have a big year. If he starts having some active hands like Wooden has, he's got more traits than Wooden to become a player in the SEC. But I agree with you. I don't like their usage of him. I'm guessing for Florida, I mean, you got this guy that's obviously very talented. He is getting bigger, and they're like, hey, we don't have a guy like this to play in the middle of the defense, so you're up. Where, you go to a school, and it's Florida. Florida recruits well, but if you go to a school that's just swimming in D-line talent, this guy's probably an attacking 3-tech. That even kicks out, plays 4-eye, 5-tech sometimes.
I would love for him to be an attacking 3-tech. So I don't know who Florida's got on the roster who maybe I should be more familiar with my alma mater. I'm going to look it up right now to see. Because there's a whole new coaching staff, right? So it's not it's not necessarily the guys who were replacing him there before. Let's see if they have any sort of summer depth chart here. Do they? Summer depth chart on Our Lads has Dexter as a defensive tackle, and they have a different player at nose tackle. Desmond Watson. I don't know who he is, but there's hope. I guess there's hope.
It reminded me a little bit of, in a different way, but like when Houston would play Logan Hall at shade nose, and he was 6'6", about 280 for them. And the difference is Logan Hall is not playing in the SEC, so he would just run around, blow up plays, make things happen. Like for Dexter, it's like, man, he's a sophomore. He's 6'5", 300. I don't think he was 300 pounds. He carries his weight really well, but like you said,
he looked a lot closer to 295 than he looked at 318 or whatever they got.
Yeah, so Ball of Clay, exciting player. I'm glad you had him at number 5. He didn't make mine, but tough. Just a tough miss. Number 4.
Yep.
Yeah, number 4 for me is Jaquelin Roy from LSU. I believe this is somebody that you watched as well.
He is number 4 for me as well. So this is
all right. Let's rock and roll. 6'4", 297, and man, 285 of those pounds is below the waist, brother. I mean, this guy's got he's got that squatty body, that thick lower half, and he knows how to generate power from it. So it's funny when you see a defensive tackle and you see sub 300 pounds, a lot of people initially react, well,
wait, you got him at 297?
Yeah.
Where'd you read that? Where'd you get 297? Did you get it for you got sources? You got sources on it?
Isn't that his listed?
No. LSU bumped him up to 315, my guy.
I had that somewhere then.
I was wondering if you had some inside sources that the school website might have been lying about the weight, which they do.
Honestly,
often.
what I probably did was I probably shifted a cell like an idiot and have somebody else's weight in his spot, because I see a 315 right near his cell.
Yeah.
So either way, okay, well, that makes a lot more sense, because this dude is just, once again, the first thing I wrote down, generates power from that thick lower half. He has this calling card, Trev, that I don't know if you caught on film. He hits the swim move in the A gap as much as anybody in this class. He loves it.
Yeah.
He hits the swim move in the A gap. He knows how to get skinny while hitting the swim move, so it works a lot. It leaves guys in the dust. Kind of has that dancing bear where he's nimble on his feet for that lower half weight. Very wide guy. I wrote down from Ultimate, he had 31 total pressures in 2021, so this is not just a big ugly down there, just containing. They let him pin his ears back and go, and he made the most of it, which was really cool to see. He really made the most of it. He got the chance to attack a little bit, and you're not going to get to hear that about all these guys on my top 5 in the scheme they played in.
Yeah.
And he got consistent pass rush with not just winning with power, but that swim move and a little bit of finesse in his game. So Roy, for me, is somebody that he looked really good on tape, and he's yet another guy in the SEC where so many of these talented defensive tackles are from. He was more than just a run stuffer. I loved what he can do when they let him shoot that A gap.
Yeah, and I would say that he's more of a pass rusher than he is a run stuffer, right?
I thought so too.
And I think that's where his best calling card is. When I look at the strengths and weaknesses that I have on here, because I have him at number 4 as well. Very first thing I wrote is a very impressive first step, burst off the snap. I think that he is, man. I mean, like, he just knows how to fire off the ball. Sometimes you could pop on guys' tape and they're going to look, they're just going to be different. You're in for a treat of a watch when it comes to pass rushing and one gapping, because you can see how fast they get off the ball. And when you're a interior defensive lineman, I think it's easier to see, because you're often going up against bigger, more powerful, slower guys. But he definitely pops in that regard, and he definitely has an advantage. I think that the first step is his calling card. It's his bread and butter. I think his initial pass rush, move and contact, they're swift and strong. The hand swipe, the club, there is go-tos. You mentioned the swim move, when he's swiping the hands and he's bringing the arm over. I mean, that's what he loves to do. He loves to get right up in you, attack one of those shoulders, get across your face, and just overwhelm you with how fast he can fire out of his stance. Now, the weakness that I have with Roy, and I'll say this, I really wanted to like this dude. Like, I really wanted to have him in my top 3, because the first step is that impressive. I just didn't think he had a pass rush plan way too often. I thought he was way too reliant on that first step of explosiveness to win him reps. And when it did not immediately win him the rep, he didn't really know what to do. The hands would kind of keep moving, but it's just like it was kind of like he was working without a plan. He did not have enough of a plan, I don't think, last year. When he went into it, you mentioned he loves the swim move. I mentioned how he loves to do the club and he swim over and swipe with the hands. Like, when he would go into it with a good plan, it would often work because he can get off the ball so quickly. But I felt like there were just too many times where he was like, all right, I'm just going to shoot this gap and I'm going to go for the shoulder. And it's not even like he was going for the shoulder with a club rip move or trying to get underneath the arm or something like that. He would every now and then, but there were a lot of times where I'm like, oh man, hit the move. Like, you had him there. And instead he just attacks the shoulder. He gets where he wants to be, But because he wasn't doing what he needed to from a pass rush move perspective, his blocker was able to recover, get in front of him, and then all of a sudden they're in a hand fight and the ball's out of the quarterback's hands. So that was the biggest thing for me is he knows he's fast. And that is I think his first step is absolutely a gift and one that could be a difference-making one at the pro level. But he's got to go into it thinking, okay, my first step gives me a leg up on the guy who's about to block me. But
lets me dictate the rush.
I've got to do more than that. I've got to win the very first phase of the rush, like you were saying right there. But then I've got to do something to finish it. I've got to get around him, get into the pocket, get to the quarterback before those 2-3 seconds are up, and he gets the ball out of his hand. So that was really the big thing with me. And it was unfortunate because I really did. I started watching Roy, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to like this dude. And I'm like, I'm going to have him in my top 3 for sure. But unfortunately, there were just too many reps that he was, I don't even want to say losing. He just wasn't winning the way that I needed him to win those, or the way that I believe he could. So that's an area that I'd love to see him get better at. I want to see right off the jump, I want to see more of a pass rush plan. And this too, when those moves don't work, what's your counter? What are you doing? Because I thought the lack of counters were even more glaring than the lack of initial pass rush, because he could sometimes hit an initial move. But of those times where he really got locked up, it's not, I wouldn't say that he was like giving up on a lot of plays. Like I said, it was just like, it was a lot of hand motion. It was like, you're just like shadow boxing or like karate fighting, just like the hands are going everywhere. And it wasn't as controlled. It wasn't as precise. It wasn't as charted as it needs to be. So I think that's the big area that I want to see from him moving forward.
Quietly, that'll be one of the most interesting units to watch this year, because the draft eligible guys, they have him, they have Ali Gay went back to school, BJ Ojulari is there. So there's a lot of draft eligible talent. I believe they have an underclassman that played very, very well last year as well.
Yeah, well, Mason.
I hate that it's escaping my name. It's escaping my brain right now.
What's his name?
I'll pull it up in 2 seconds as I have.
Mason Smith.
Mason Smith, yes. Mason Smith was a guy that had 4 sacks as a younger player last year and did get some rush. Yeah, so...
insane.
I mean, that's a unit that has a lot of talent, and it's going to be fun to watch them work together because, like I said, 3 of those guys are expected to be drafted, and then you brought up Mason Smith, who... nope, that was it. Okay, so...
Right, you were about to read, like...
I sorted them in Ultimate and had them sorted, and then all of a sudden a safety got in there, and I'm like, that guy's not playing on the defensive
so you
line.
Just saw the grade?
I saw I saw the sacks and the quarterback hits. This is a DB that had like some numbers in that category, so I was like, what? No. So, okay, so that was a classic. Trevor and Connor had the same guy at number 4. I feel like that happens a lot. I will have a clarifier here, and I'm curious if you agree. We're jumping into a totally different water right now from the last
I would agree.
guys.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny that what you said about Jaquelin Roy, how you turned it on. You're like, I want to love this guy. I thought he would be in the next tier after I watched some of his big production, and I don't think so at all. So, all right, let's get into it. Number 3, and maybe this is a surprise because I know people love this player, and there's a lot of things that I love too. Bryan Bresee from Clemson.
Oh, you did it. You had the stones to do what I didn't do.
And I mean, of course, it comes with the old. To be fair to Bresee being in this spot and not higher, is that he obviously had a season-ending injury last year that cost him, most of his season. Where when you look at what he was able to do in terms of the opportunity to get production, he's somebody that just didn't have the same amount of snaps as a lot of these guys, and he's coming back from that injury. This is the number 1 overall recruit from the 2020 class. So there have been mega expectations for this guy. He, when on the field, has looked really good. He is 6'5", 300 pounds, carries that weight very, very cleanly.
He looks thick. He looks dense
great
everywhere.
Yeah. He everywhere. You're right. There's no like, okay, you got to get stronger here or there. I wrote the combination of quickness and power is in a pretty unique tier with this guy. That the fact that you have that kind of play strength, but you're also very quick off the ball or during the play and have the burst, is you see why this is what number one overall recruits are made of, right? They possess athletic traits that most guys in the country don't. So Brzee has all of that. What I will say, total junkyard dog against the run. More than willing to do the dirty work. No problem mixing it up. No problem scratching, clawing, trailing plays from the backside. He'll do all of that stuff. So there is no, I was the number one recruit ego in this guy where put me on the edge and I'm going to win one-on-ones and I want the sacks and I want the numbers. This guy will do all of the BS that the defensive staff there has asked him to do, which is a lot, as we talked about Miles Murphy over and over again, a lot of read and react, a lot of contain, a lot of the not fun things that gets you off the field and wins you in football games. So the not fun things on first and second down that puts the opposition in third and long. So I want to make that very clear with him when you do watch the games that he has played in, why the stats might not be jaw-dropping, but they are good. Scheme-diverse player with an athletic build for multiple alignments up front. If you want this guy to be your 3-tech, he could do that. If you want him to play 5-tech, he could do that. If you want to kick him inside, shade nose and nose on passing downs, he could do that. So Brzee, super talented, all things everybody already knew. I liked what I've seen on film. I just want to see him healthy, and I want to see him go from being a elite recruit that's been a good player to an elite college football player and NFL draft prospect.
I have Brzee at number 2, and I wasn't jazzed about it because the other player that I think both of us are going to mention.
You wanted to do it.
No, I did. I really wanted to do it because I think Brzee is a good player, but
these 3 guys are good, really good.
I don't know how much further I'd go to say that he's I don't know. So, all right, he's 6'5", he's 300 pounds. He's the former number 1 overall recruit in the country. I mean, like his pedigree kind of like talks or speaks for itself. Tore his ACL after 4 games last year, so that's not ideal. Obviously, he needs to just show that he's healthy more than anything else. Here's the strengths and weaknesses that I have with him. Length on the interior presents unique advantages, being 6'5", 300 pounds, kind of the same thing as Gervin Dexter, right? When you have a guy who is 6'5", has that kind of leverage as a 0 or 1 technique player, or just lined up wherever you're going up against guards or centers, it's very unique. You don't have a lot of guards or centers that normally have the length, strength, speed ability to be able to handle that. And I think that, Brzee just presents a very unique advantage in that way. He's a strong player whose pass rush profile is based around a bull rush and a club rip move. That's what he likes to do. That's his consistent go-to. One-on-one, he can really stand out with strength, with really nice lower body drive, often pushing guys back into the pocket right in front of the quarterback. Covers ground very nicely when he's slanting and shooting gaps on the inside. Does a lot more slanting than the shooting of gaps. Weaknesses. He's got the body type of a defensive end, but he's playing nose tackle on the interior. You know, it was one of those things where it's the same thing with Dexter. I kind of understand why you're playing him at nose and one because you want to get that really unique length advantage, but he wasn't. I didn't think he was super impactful as what you want from a nose. Like, you need a nose tackle player. I guess you don't need this. It depends what scheme you're running and how you want the guys to really play with strength and weaknesses compared to the rest of the defense. But like, Brzee gets blown back by double teams. Like, he can't hold a point of attack against double teams. He's 6'5", 300 pounds. And like, he's strong, but it kind of goes back to like, I liked this player. I didn't love this player. And when you look at what Clemson asks him to do a lot, it's a lot of slants. Like, it's a lot of stunts.
Dude,
like,
it's all it is.
Right. They're not asking him to really do much. So I don't have a ton of pass rush development from him. This is kind of like it's a little bit like the Trayvon Walker scenario where you're just projecting how physically gifted this guy can be into the NFL, because you're not seeing it. Now, Brent Venables is no longer at Clemson, so I wonder what they're going to do with Brzee, if it's going to be the same role, if they're going to let him pin his ears back a little bit more, if it's going to be a little bit more traditional. I'm not sure. But when I was watching him before he got hurt last year, I'm like, this is a unique, clearly gifted player who's not making that much of an individual impact. I guess, that's probably harsh, because the whole point of what he was doing is he was opening up rushing lanes for other players, whether it be the linebackers or the defensive ends or whatever it was. And he does a great job of slanting and stunting and things like that. I just
I couldn't put him at
I did not love him, man. I didn't love him. I really didn't. And I wish, you put him at 3. I wish you put him at 3, but there's another guy that we're going to talk about that kind of has a little bit of limitations, and he has his own health problems as well that we've got to talk about. But for being a former number 1 overall recruit and a player who people told me consistently over the last year, oh, just wait till you watch Brian Brzee, just wait till you watch him. He is good. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that he is a bad football player. But what they ask him to do and where they play him on the defense has limited the way that I have to project him to the NFL. He's a good defensive lineman, but I'm not super jazzed about him. He's not like a guy that I have to have right now. So very intrigued to see how they play him and where they play him in this upcoming season.
I just think that they never let him take over games. And that is so hard on an evaluator, right? Like, we've been told for the longest time this guy has the talent to be somebody that constantly takes over games. And they never put him in that spot where they were like, okay, you're the guy that's taking over the game.
And some people would tell you, like, doing the dirty work in the middle and freeing up the rest of the team is taking over the game. And I hear you, but again, he's doing that in Clemson's defensive line scheme. If you're playing him at nose tackle in the NFL and he's going up against a power blocking team in the middle, he's getting blown off the ball. Yeah. At least right now he is. So I don't know. It's clearly a very talented player. I feel like I'm being too hard on the overall talent because talent is what matters most when you're talking about guys going from one level to the next. It's a former number 1 overall recruit. You've got to respect that. But I was certainly hoping to, I think that you put it beautifully there. I was hoping to see him take over series, not even full games.
Yeah, not games. Games is unfair.
Series, man. Like on a 3rd down or a 2nd down, like set the tone, go get the tackle in the backfield. And they just never let him do that. And he does not have the profile to do that right now because it's not what he's being taught to do. So just a very difficult eval for me.
So my number 2, I thought the film was just, I had to have him at number 2. I don't care what the consensus is. I don't care what the other rankings are, the hype, the recruiting. Siaki Ika, the nose tackle from Baylor. I mean,
who was formerly at LSU.
And came over to Baylor for the 2021 season and was the newcomer in the Big 12 in that conference. And he made a statement. I mean, one look at this guy, dude. He's 6'4". He's listed at 358 on Baylor's site. I have it on authority that's a little closer to 350. And that's a big difference. Like playing at 360 or playing at 350. I'd rather have him play at 350. Yeah, I don't know why they listed him at 358. I've heard that's not what he's at right now. Who knows? Whatever. Baylor updated to closer to 350. So true zero tech. Like all the guys we've talked about were like, man, they get asked to play nose and shade nose, and it doesn't put them in the best spot. This dude,
born
right over the center, an absolute unit. He's the width of a door frame. He's a width of a hallway. True zero tech, shade nose, built like a freight train. He makes offensive linemen look small. Like, I don't know if I screenshotted the all-22s. Sometimes when he's near a guard or a center, it looks so funny. He makes them look like running backs. That's how big he is.
Yep.
Surprising quickness considering the weight he carries. Trevor, it's crazy the way this guy moves for that size. It doesn't make any sense. You look at him and you go, and you look at where they line him up. If you just screenshot the end zone view of the all-22 and you're like, okay, Baylor wants this guy to 2-gap. They want him to hold the point of attack. They want him to contain. They want him to stop the run. And if it's an obvious passing down situation, which we know happens in that conference a lot with the teams they play, maybe they'll let him push the pocket a little bit. No. This guy can do a lot of different things. He's very nimble on his feet when closing in on the pocket to finish plays. He understands how to disengage blocks, get hands off of him. I saw a head fake and then to go cross face and turn into the pocket. It's really, really impressive the way he can torque his body at that weight. But he does have the strength of a traditional 350-plus pounder that plays nose tackle, where when you ask him to be responsible, you ask him to contain, you ask him to hold the point of attack, he can do that. He can take on 2 blockers. He can redirect running backs to go wide instead of through the A and the B gaps. I love this player. I really, really do. I don't know exactly what led to his departure from LSU. And when I say departure, I'm not saying it kicked like how he ended up at Baylor, but Baylor's defensive system has been awesome for guys going to the NFL. Look at last year's NFL draft. Look at this dude's film from 2021. I think he already has blossomed into an above-average player that might even quietly be a star and has a legitimate chance to go in the first round next year.
So I had him at number 3. I had him right behind Rasee. And no, I mean, you're right. He's awesome. His projection is certainly a lot easier because you see the exact type of player that you want to see on film. You really do. And then you get those added advantages, right? What is he? What was the height? What was the height for him?
He's 6'4".
6'4", 355 is kind of what I have him listed at here, okay? If that's the case, and the guy's playing nose tackle, you want to see him play nose tackle. Don't get moved off the ball. Be an anchor. Dominate with strength when you're one-on-one. Don't really lose ground when you're anchoring. You see all of that with him. He checks every single one of those boxes. And then you mentioned it. Sometimes he'll hit you cross face. He'll hit you with a little move. He'll give you a club. He'll give you a swim. And you're like, hold up. What are we watching? The second coming of Vita Vea over here? Like what is this guy doing? And so he gives you that plus advantage in the pass rushing category as well. So he is certainly a lot easier to love. He's a lot easier to peg and say, this is why I'm drafting you. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to be able to give us. Now, he missed all of last season because he tore his triceps before the season. And that's that was him, right? Or was it somebody else? Why am I thinking of somebody else?
The triceps was the guy that transferred to Arizona.
That was it.
To Louisville from Arizona State.
Had that on the brain. So,
yep.
Look, I think the disadvantages of him, thankfully, not that he has healthy triceps. Biggest issue with him is balance. Like, he played on the ground way more than I thought he should. And I get it. Like, sometimes it's a technique. Sometimes when you're trying to get really low, sometimes when you're trying to maintain leverage, you go down to the knee and you try to make sure that you're able to you're still like forklifting somebody. And it's not the cleanest way to do it, but I understand why if you're getting in heavy fights in the trenches, sometimes that happens. You can get down to a knee, but he has a handful of times where he's just getting pushed around. He's getting a little too low. He can't stay on his feet. And then he gets absolutely bowled over. Like he'll get pushed over. He'll get completely pushed to the ground. And that's gotta get cleaned up a little bit. We need you on your feet a little bit more. We can't have you playing on the ground. You're not really an asset to the defensive line when you're doing that. The short arms were a problem at times when it came to disengaging with blockers, right? He can hit a nice pass rush move on you. I love when he hits the rip. I love when he can get across the face. I love how he's using his lateral quickness and his first step explosiveness there. But there are other times where, he's getting into a bear fight with a trench player, and the short arms just kind of show up for him. I think he's got a little bit shorter arms than somebody that you normally see with somebody who is 6'4". At least that's something that I wrote down. That's something that I saw from the film. So look, I really like this player for exactly what you think he's going to be. And I think that makes his projection very easy. I think a lot of people are going to watch him during summer scouting, and they're going to come away very, very impressed, just like we were here. I'd be shocked if he wasn't in most people's top 3 because, like I said, you see the weight, you see the size, you see the role, you see where they're positioning him. You go, okay, this is what I want to see. You see that, and then you get to see even more when he gives you the pass rush flashes. So Siaki Ika is from Baylor. Is definitely somebody that you guys need to know and get some eyes on.
I think that this is a position that teams are struggling to find. And what I say that means, like, you look at the contract the Jaguars just gave a guy like Foley Fadukasi that is a true nose tackle, but does not have much pass rush ability. When I look at Ika, he's somebody that can be a true nose tackle, but the fact that you can keep him on the field on passing downs, it might be his calling card to, okay, I'm not just a rotational player that traditionally goes in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, the 4th round of the NFL draft. I can be a first-round player because of that impactability. All right. I'm really glad we both like him. Cannot wait to watch that Baylor defense fly around again this year. Number 1, dude. I mean, is there any surprise?
Absolutely no question about it. Absolutely no debate about this.
So I made a mistake. I started this exercise by watching Jalen Carter.
Brother, I thought the same exact thing. The same exact thing. Honestly, I started to watch Brian Brzee, his tape after Jalen Carter's, and I was like, man, I don't like this guy at all. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, hold on, wait. Is it? I think it's just because I watched Jalen Carter, because Jalen Carter is truly an alien among us. The interior defensive linemen should not be able to play the way that Jalen Carter does. He is, if he was in last year's draft class, he'd be a top 5 player, no doubt about it, right? Right?
Oh, easily.
He would have been a top 5 player, no question about it. The only reason that Jalen Carter is not suiting up for your NFL team this year,
easily,
is because, one, your NFL team probably wouldn't have been picking high enough, and two, just because he was a sophomore. That's it. That's it. He was his film. I'll let you. I cut you off here to freak out. And
no. You're okay.
Jalen Carter, but he was unbelievable, man. I thought that when I watched his film, I was blown away.
So he's from the same area in Florida as Warren Sapp. So he's kind of been, so he's been getting that his entire life. And while normally you would say about anybody, like, don't do that to a kid, this guy's going to challenge, like, he's going to push to try to live up to that. He's that good of a prospect right now.
Yep.
Former 4-star and was a top 15 recruit nationally. So when you hear that he's a 4-star, you're like, oh, wow, I'm surprised he's not a 5-star. He was a top 15 recruit overall in the country, so probably one of those fringe guys.
Probably should
weightlifting and basketball background. So this isn't a dude that, like, got to school and they're like, okay, now you're going to be on a college lifting program. He's been competitive weightlifting for a while, and you could see it. He's got an excellent frame, excellent strength, plays with tremendous balance, Trevor. I know we talked about it with Ika. With Carter, never on the ground.
Nope.
Can get pinballed by a guard and a center. And when I say pinballed, a guy that he runs into a lot of blocks, whether it's slide blocks or whether it's double teams or help in pass pro, never phased by it all. Just kind of pinballs around that way. He can turn the corner at the top of the rush. Like, no 300-pounder, for people listening to this getting into scouting. When you look at a guy trying to turn the corner, I don't want to use the term necessarily bend, because I think that kind of indicates like contorting your body. But turn the corner, turn your body, ankle flexion.
If you could like fire your hips, like completely flip your hips from one spot to another while doing a move. Yeah.
300-pounders, that's not like on the checklist, okay? No. That's not even a thought. This guy can do it. He can turn the corner into the pocket. Swim moves, offensive line, trying to gain low. So he's so strong, right? Offensive linemen try to cheat a little bit with him, and they try to get under him for leverage, and he just breaks a swim on them, right over him. He's incredibly intelligent. He's very sharp pre-snap. He often diagnoses if it's going to be a run or a pass. Throughout the game, he starts to diagnose whether it's going to be what the offensive lineman is trying to do, like I just previously said, gaining leverage and cheating a little bit low on him, then he'll play high. He's kind of like watching a heavyweight boxer that lets the fight drag on a little bit and will counterpunch throughout the game. And he's just so intelligent. He can do both against the run. He could shoot gaps if they want him to shoot gaps. He can hold the point of attack and control if they need him to control. The last thing I wrote down, just rare stop and start for someone that large. He's different. He's a different dude.
This is one of the easiest evals I've ever done. Jalen Carter, and what comes to mind is I watched Quentin Nelson. I watched like 3 games of Quentin Nelson back when he was at Notre Dame, and I'm like,
he's just better than everyone else.
All pro player. I mean, what do you want? This is he checks quite literally every box that you would want. I'm not saying that Jalen Carter is a perfect prospect, but this is the easiest. Yep, this guy's going to be good in the NFL that I may have ever done. I mean, for him to not make it in the NFL is just going to be some act of God at that point. Like he has been on the pathway for such a long time. He had 34 pressures last year on just 264 pass rushing snaps. Okay. 90 elite pass rush grade, the highest of any defensive tackle in the country. And that is a true sophomore that is able to do that. Strengths, elite movement skills for an interior player. Extremely rare, especially when he is moving laterally. He can cross the face of interior offensive linemen in the blink of an eye. Power at the punch is very strong and very violent when performing any sort of push-pull, getting hands on the offensive lineman. Violent and quick swim move as well that could be a go-to and a deadly one in the NFL. There is so much to love about Jalen Carter, whether it's the build, whether it's now the experience, already the production success, the athletic gifts that could say that the ceiling is even higher for him. The only real weaknesses I have to his game are the hands could be a little bit more controlled at times, specifically when he is trying to swipe, when he's just trying to swipe the hands and disengage from the offensive lineman. I've noticed that sometimes the hands can be all over the place. When he's doing some of those other moves that you mentioned, he's pretty precise with it. You mentioned how intelligent he is as a rusher, and I agree with you. But I think that sometimes when he's going for a swipe specifically, the hands can be a little all over the place. It's almost like he's just trying to do it too fast, too violent, and he just needs to be a little bit more controlled in it. Also notice that the hands can be a little bit low at times. It feels like he does this when he's trying to look casual or mysterious to the offensive lineman and like not let them know what his next move is going to be, but he doesn't need to do that. It's kind of like he'll fire off the ball at the snap and his hands will just be kind of like down near where his hips are because he's almost like looking at the interior offensive lineman and saying, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because he knows he's that fast. He knows he's that violent. He's that strong that he could basically have the offensive lineman crapping in their pants when he has that element of surprise where he's not giving anything away. But you don't totally have to do that. You know, you can still do that with the hands up, chopping the hands, having them more in an engaged position to be able to hit some sort of move, do exactly what you want, hit a club rip, swipe the hands away, hit a swim move, whatever it is. The hands can just be a little bit higher. They don't have to be that low for you to maintain that element of surprise and what your next move is going to be. And honestly, man, that's all I got for him. This is truly one of the most gifted interior defensive linemen I've ever scouted. And just an incredibly easy eval because you watch 2 games of this guy. I watched 3 for Jalen, but You watch 2 games of him and you go, yep, that's an NFL player playing in a college football program. And that's kind of the way that I see Jalen Carter. I would be shocked if this is not a top 5, maybe even top 3 overall pick when it comes to next year's draft.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I just think that, like you said, he's ready to play in the NFL today. He absolutely, when you kind of stack up this class, like you always get surprise players, right? But as we get pretty deep into the summer scouting, you kind of feel like Will Anderson and Jalen Carter sitting in the top 5 right now, and they're just not going to leave. It's you don't want to get too far ahead, but they're just so ready to go with how they win and how they dominate in the SEC. And it's a fun change because we obviously really we didn't have guys like that last year. I mean, Aiden was really good, but Aiden also took a massive leap from last summer to throughout the season. Like these guys,
right?
They've arrived already, dude.
Yep, they're already here. Like I said, if they could have declared for the draft last year, they would have. Both of these guys would have been top 10 picks easily would have been. I mean, Will Anderson clearly would have been the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, and Jalen Carter probably would have been the number 2 overall pick right after Will Anderson. So these are 2 guys that,
yeah. When you watch them, they're better than Trayvon Walker was as a prospect. Not to do the old "let's kill Trayvon Walker for the millionth time."
No,
honest.
I'm just saying.
The films, they're all playing the same games. They're playing next to each other.
Exactly right.
Right
and
there.
I think you'd clearly rather have Jalen Carter than any of them. So, all right. Anybody outside of your top 5 that you wanted to give a shout out to?
Well, no, because I already did the. I already talked about Dexter.
Yep.
I know you briefly mentioned Jermaine Lowell. I want to make sure I'm saying his last name right.
I believe so.
He transferred from Arizona State to Louisville. He's the one that had the triceps injury that ended his season. He's an interesting player because he's a very compact player playing on the defensive line. He's one of those more Grady Jarrett type shorter defensive linemen. So he's somebody people should keep an eye on. But Those were the main ones on today's show that I thought were worth a preseason mention.
I also watched Jacob Slade from Michigan State. What I'm gonna read the official measurements here, so I get it right. 6'4", 315 pounds, former 3-star dude. Hey, look, he's just a solid interior defensive lineman. Like this is a guy who I think is going to get drafted in the mid rounds of the NFL draft, and he's just going to be a solid backup, rotational spot, kind of a big strength defensive tackle. He understands why he's on the team, right? Eat double teams, be strong, be an anchor, open things up for other players. And he's got a little bit of pass rush to him, but you know that his bread and butter in the NFL is just going to be one of those rotational bodies that you could throw in the trenches that are just really is able to hold the point of attack for you. So he's just one of those true understands what his role is as an interior defensive lineman. And I think that can have a long career in the NFL. It really can. Like you could play for a long time, even if you're not a star at the defensive level. So wanted to give out a shout out to Jacob Slade as well.
Yeah, so this is a group that, hasn't been really that deep. It wasn't really that deep last year, and I think that obviously now we have a star talent at the top of this one, a guy like Brzee that you hope makes that jump, and obviously we really like Ika as well. So this group has a few guys, like you said, with Slade that, they just do their job, and a lot of the work of being a 3-tech can be not pretty at times, but that's the nature of the position.
Yep, some nice players in this class, and an absolute all-world unicorn that's at the very top of it in Jalen Carter. So there we go. Those are our top 5s for the interior defensive line going into the preseason there. That's it for this episode, which means the next time you guys hear our voice, it will be part 2 of the expansion series that we are doing. Again, if you missed part 1, go back and listen to Monday's episode where we kind of set the stage for an NFL expansion team. We list all the protected players that we go through in the NFL that are currently there. And then next Monday, we are drafting from the guys that are left, the guys that are available. It's one player from every team that wasn't protected. We've got to stay cap compliant, so there's a little bit of strategy there. And then, of course, we're going to shout out you guys as teams that you build from now until then anyways. Thank you so much for already doing that. I know we're going to get a lot more between now and then, so I'll just preemptively say love you guys. Thank you so much for caring so much about this little project. It's made it so much fun for us. Can't wait to cap it off with episode 2 on Monday. I'm Trevor. That's Connor. This has been the NFL Stock Exchange. We'll see you guys then.